Focus on the I in liberal, which stands for incompetent. Absolutely incompetent, knows nothing, brings absolutely no skill, none to the White House, none whatsoever. But he is pretty good at screwing things up. My goodness, Afghanistan. You know, they want to forget about 9/11. We're not going to forget about 9/11 or what happened in Afghanistan. You know, a big problem here, Joe, he's so caught up with himself and his family history. He thought he knew everything about Afghanistan, in part because his late son, Bo, was in the military for a little while.
Like so many military families, thinking of their loved ones who served, we think of our son, Bo, today. My deceased son, Bo, served in Iraq for a full year. My son, Bo, served in Iraq for a year. My son, Bo, served in Iraq for a year. I'm the first president in 40 years, I'm told, who had a son or daughter who served in a war zone.
So you see how it was a political bragging point, talking point? Joe and Bo. Bo served honorably, great, but he was, well, one soldier. I believe he was there as a lawyer, perfectly honorable service. But Joe took that and started telling the generals who's boss. Yeah, he knew more than just about anybody in the room, in part because Bo had served. That's General McKenzie, and we now know that General McKenzie, who was a CENTCOM commander, told Joe Biden, hey, we need a residual force, at least in Bagram.
McKenzie believes the military alone shouldn't take the blame.
I think the U.S. failure in Afghanistan was not the failure solely of the U.S. military, although we certainly bear responsibility for that, but a whole-of-government approach that simply failed.
And who's in charge of the government? Who's in this matter? Joe Biden. Translation, Joe Biden didn't listen to us. He was arrogant. He was stupid. And he did his own thing. Joe is incompetent politically as well. He's always jumping on the latest craze with the left and trying to make it his own. He delegitimized law enforcement. In addition to trying to defund them, you remember Black Lives Matter, how awful that was, the riots, the chaos. Joe didn't condemn that. He celebrated it. He sanctified it. He saw it as a political opportunity. And when it came to defunding the police, he agreed.
They become the enemy. They're supposed to be protecting these people. So my generic point is that...
Do we agree that we can redirect some of the funding?
Yes, absolutely.
Redirect some of the funding from the police to social services. Yes, absolutely. Joe Biden denies ever saying that. The media cover for him, but he did. Absolutely. Also this from the campaign.
The fact of the matter is that what's happened is that we're in a situation now where there are so many people who are in jail and shouldn't be in jail. The whole means by which this should change is the whole model has to change. We should be talking about rehabilitation. Nobody should be in jail for a nonviolent crime.
Nobody should be in jail for a nonviolent crime. Well, tell that to some of the January Sixers, okay? Remember your pledge for the January Sixers, like the Horns guy and so many others who did not break anything, who did not hurt anyone. If you really wanted to unify this country, you would have let them all go. All right. But now, everything seems to be changing. So what's Joe's latest tune?
We should all agree the answer is not to defund the police. It's to fund the police. Fund them. Fund them.
Fund them. Fund them. Throw money. Hire 100,000 cops over the next 15 years. It's not about a shortage of police or equipment. It was backing them up, right? Not delegitimizing them. And Joe did in big ways and small. Hey, who do you call when somebody's about to jump off a building? Who do you call? The cops, right? Cops and the firefighters. Joe thinks he has a better solution.
Why is a police officer showing up to the suicide threat, someone trying to jump off a building? We need more social workers there.
All right, Joe, you know nothing. You have no skill whatsoever. Let me fill you in on why cops go to these situations. Because they're dangerous, okay? They're dangerous. Somebody jumping up the bridge. By the way, a lot of these police are trained in this very matter. Sometimes these guys want to take somebody with them. They grab somebody, or they change their mind and have to be rescued. That is complex. That is dangerous work. How many social workers are going to do that, Joe? Stay the hell out of it. You've already done enough damage. You're questioning of police, questioning their very existence, and you've made their job a lot harder.
Get in the car. Dude, I'm stopping you. Do you have a license? Do you have a license?
For what?
I'm stopping you. Do you have a license?
What done?
Hands on your butt. Hey, stop fighting.
What's going on?
How many occupants are in your vehicle?
It's only myself. Why are your weapons drawn? What's going on?
Open the door slowly and step out. Open the door.
I'm not getting out the vehicle. What's going on?
Get out the car.
Hey, why listen and obey cops, right? I mean, they're systemically racist. They were formed, I think, to catch slaves, right? Isn't that what it's all about? Yeah, you shouldn't. This is the result of Joe Biden's rhetoric, the left, and, oh yeah, his vice president, his clueless vice president.
We have 2 million people cross this border for the first time ever. You're confident this border is secure?
We have a secure border in that is a priority for any nation, including ours and our administration.
Could she pass a field sobriety test? What's going on? You got to have a better answer for that. She doesn't know anything about governing. She doesn't know anything about politics. She does love the perks. Her personal aides are always pumping out these videos of her getting on Air Force Two, I guess. Look at me. I'm getting on a big jet. I mean, boy, you can really relate to that. Even the left hates these pictures, by the way. When Roe v. Wade was overturned, she put out this. There she is, looking at her subjects from something that you've probably never been able to do, or I've been able to do, stand up on a plane and watch TV. You can't do that. You just, but I guess you can on Air Force Two. Makes her special, right? I'm not a big fan of some Republican vice presidents either. This is Mike Pence, of course, and, well, Mike is a very cautious individual. Now, remember when Joe Biden spoke a little over a week ago? It was probably the worst thing I'd ever seen from a president. I mean, calling half the country extremists, a threat to democracy, all that nonsense. Mike Pence waited a week before he weighed in. Here's what he finally said. Okay? Mike Pence, never before in the history of our nation has a president stood before the American people and accused millions of his own countrymen of being a threat to this country. To top it all, President Biden had the audacity to claim, I'm asking our nation to come together, to unite. Next, please. Well, Mr. President, I've got some good news. The American people will come together in 2022 and 2024. We will be more united than ever before, and we will save this country from Joe Biden, the radical left. Okay, nice statement. But here's the deal. It came out September 8, 2022. Joe Biden spoke a week earlier. This is what he does. He makes sure that everybody agrees with him. He wants to know how things play out first. This is what he does. He's always taking the temperature, and it takes him a week and a half to figure out which way to go.
I know we all got our doubts about the last election. And I want to assure you, I share the concerns of millions of Americans about voting irregularities. And I promise you, come this Wednesday, we'll have our day in Congress. We'll hear the objections. We'll hear the evidence.
Even that was a big fake out. We'll hear the objections. We won't do anything about it. That's the way he rolls. 1 week, I was shooting off opinions on Twitter 30 seconds after the speech. Even during the speech, that man is not a leader. This one is.
Ultimately, I'm always right.
You know, instead of second-guessing him and being horrified by, oh, my goodness gracious, how could he say that on Truth Social or Twitter or whatever? He has unique gifts, and there's so much we can learn from him. And before 9/11, he said the most remarkable thing. This is all the way back in January of 2000 in one of his books. He actually wrote this. I am really convinced we're in danger of the sort of terrorist attacks that will make the bombing of the 1993 Trade Center look like kids playing with firecrackers. How about that, huh? One day, we're told that a shadowy figure with no fixed address named Osama bin Laden is public enemy number one, and U.S. jet fighters lay waste to his camp in Afghanistan. He escapes back under some rock, and a few news cycles later, it's on to a new enemy and new crisis. How about that? Some 19 months before 9/11, he was writing about Osama bin Laden. And regarding the pandemic, we all gave up handshaking there for a while. Remember? Fist bumps or whatever. I actually prefer this to handshaking. I had never had a problem with handshaking, but President Trump always did. An interesting anticipation and recommendation. This was all the way back in 1997. One of the curses of American society is the simple act of shaking hands. And the more successful and famous one becomes, the worse this terrible custom seems to get. I happen to be a clean hands freak. I feel much better after I thoroughly wash my hands, which I do as often as possible. All right. Recent medical reports have come out saying that colds and various other ailments are spread through the act of shaking hands. I have no doubt about this. The Japanese have it right. They stand slightly apart and do a quick, formal, and very beautiful bow in order to acknowledge each other's presence. This is an ancient act and was probably originated eons ago by someone like me, a germ freak. Whoever formalized this greeting was very smart and far beyond his time. I wish we would develop a similar greeting custom in America. And all right, wrapping up here. In fact, I've often thought of taking out a series of newspaper ads encouraging the abolishment of the handshake. At the very least, people would realize why I hate to shake hands and not take it personally. In any event, if any of you folks reading this book really like me, please approach me at any time in a restaurant or elsewhere and don't stick out your hand, but simply bow. I will bow back and greatly appreciate the thought. There's no one like him, huh? So much. And by the way, really, I think the handshake is totally passé right now. I know some people like to do it to screw Fauci, but I like not shaking hands. It actually works for me, and it actually worked for the Queen as well. Well, actually, do we know how the Queen felt about shaking hands? It doesn't matter at this point, but we do know that she was a devoted Christian and one of the too few who spoke boldly about her relationship with Jesus Christ. We'll be right back.